The Lanteria HR absence module provides the ability for every employee to have a certain number of vacation, sickness, and other absence accrual days allotted to them for a given time period. Whether that accrual is built up on a monthly basis, calculated on a daily basis, or allotted for the entire year at a time. Employees have the ability to accumulate and be allocated that paid time off. Likewise, they can register those absences to request a vacation or sickness type or a business trip or something of that nature, which initiates an approval process for them to use those days. However, how do we allocate the time? How do we define exactly how much time a certain employee gets? For this, Lanteria utilizes what we call absence plans. Now, absence plans are a way of specifying how much time every employee gets based on certain criteria. It's important to note that while we have one default plan in the system, and you can create as many different absence plans as you might deem necessary. In our demo environment here, we just have a standard absence plan, and this is marked as the default, so that all new employees will be credited with this particular absence plan. However, you can have 5 or 6 or 7 different absence plans if your organization requires it. Now, going into the details of each absence plan, we can actually see all the inner workings of how these allotments are calculated. Firstly, we have the absence plan details up here, which can set to default the description and the title, and we can also prorate current and new rules. We'll come back to this because the absence rules are important in our absence plan. Now, we have 3 major types of absence types in the system. We have the annual paid leave, which is holiday or vacation leave generally, annual paid sickness leave, and annual other absences. Annual other absences are those types of absences that might be accounted for jury duty or military leave of absence, something that's just a very, very rare sort of occurrence with each employee. Now, within each of these absence types, we can create subtypes for each absence. In this case, we can what we call special rules. So in sickness, for example, we can have just a regular sickness, or we can have emergency medical leave, or long-term disability, a medical appointment, and so on. And each of these can have their own rules that guide how an employee can request those absences at a given time. However, the primary rules that we use when allocating a certain number of paid vacation days or paid leave days is determined in the calculation rules. So the figures that we see here, we have 20 days, for example, of annual leave, 8 booked, 12 leave, and so on. This figure here is based on these calculation rules. And these calculation rules are specified based on the age of the employee or the seniority of the employee in the system. So an employee who's been working for the company for less than 1 year, all the way up to 2 years completed, would have 10 days allotted to them. Likewise, anyone who has been working for the company at a minimum of 3 years, up to 5 years, would have 15 days, and then 6 to 99 would be 20 days. These number of days are allotted automatically based on the employee's seniority in the company. So over here we can see the seniority of Montgomery Burns is 9 years. His absence plan is the standard absence plan, and subsequently we see that he falls in the 20-day range from 6 to 99 years, having to accrue that many paid vacation days every year. Likewise, we can set up similar calculation rules for each sickness leave as well. So we have a range of 0 to whenever. Everybody gets 10 days a year. Now, in addition to the standard calculation rules, we also have a number of other settings for each absence type that can be applied to help govern how these days can be used. Within the settings of the absence type, in this case the annual paid leave, we can choose the accrual period, which shows how many we see. Do we get the entire year's worth of absence allotment given to us at a time? Do we get a little bit every month at the start, or a little bit at the end of every month, or in bi-weekly periods, or even daily accrual rates? Point is that the amount that we have here in this green box, the amount that the employee is able to see that's available to them to book, is accrued based on the settings of that absence type in their absence plan. Now, in Montgomery Burns' case, we see that he's allotted 20 days a year, And the accrual period is mentioned for a yearly accrual. So he gets 20 days at the start of the company year every year. Likewise, we can choose to shift the months before an individual is allowed to spend their accrued time. So we can select 1 month or 3 months as necessary. We can also choose carried over units as well. We can choose how many days or hours an individual is allowed to have carried over from the previous year into the current year as well. So this is really for unused vacation days or unused sickness days. Now, if it's sickness days, there may not be any that we wish to carry over, but if it's a vacation day, then it might be important for us to allow 5 or 10 days a year, or all of them, or however many you need to. Of course, when things are carried over, when these days are carried over, unused vacation days are carried over, we can have an automated approval process happen, in which case the employee will automatically see the previous year's days added to their total paid leave for that particular year. However, if of course we choose to not have that, it allows us another degree of control for the HR to actually have to approve to make sure that those days are allowed to be carried over for that year. Down here we can choose whether we have days or hours, that is to say whether we list 80 hours or 2 weeks per year that are accrued to an individual. So however you wish to have your time off calculated, then you can use that. And of course you can choose between working days or calendar days as well. So within each absence type, we have a number of settings that apply to that type only, as well as the calculation rules that apply for that type, which are going to show how many days are accrued based on the seniority of the employee. And the same goes for the sickness leave as well. In our other absences, we actually have the ability to specify the number of days for each given other absence type, because the idea behind the other absences is that these should be very rare occurrences in which the employee would have to request maybe once a year or once every 5 years or something like that, but we need to have those things accounted for in the system. So, setting up our absence plans, we should really consider what types of absences we need to document, taking into account, of course, that there are 3 main types in the system, and then that we can allow for subtypes later on. Lanteria HR also offers a dynamic absence module, or rather a dynamic absences configuration, in which you can create additional main types of absences in addition to the default ones that are given here. However, this is not a standard out-of-the-box configuration, but something that you should request through your Lanteria consultant. And that concludes this presentation on absence plans and setting up your absence plans. Thanks for watching.